On June the 25th, 1876, at the Battle of the Little Bighorn, 5 companies of the U.S. 7th Cavalry, under the direct command of George Armstrong Custer, were wiped out. Many artifacts initially lost on the battlefield were to have a strange afterlife. Take, for example, the engraved pocket watch of George Armstrong Custer. There are at least 2 stories regarding the Odyssey of the watch. In Son of the Morning Star, historian Evan S. Connell relates that in 1906, a Montana saloonkeeper bought the watch from a Sioux Indian. The watch was lost in a dice game, exhibited in a traveling show, and finally turned up in California before being purchased for the Don and Stella Foote collection in Billings, Montana. The Footes would eventually offer their Treasures of the West collection to the city of Billings, which rejected the gift because the city did not want to pay to have the collection insured. The collection was sold off, and the whereabouts of Custer's watch is now unknown. A second legend runs like this. In his book, The Law Marches West, a Canadian Mountie named Cecil Denny claimed that he had retrieved the watch from Sitting Bull and sent it to Libby Custer. Custer's final message. Custer's final message to Captain Benteen to come quick, bring packs, written down by Adjutant Cook, went missing for decades. In the 1920s, one of Custer's early biographers, William Graham, tried to locate the missing document, only to be told by Benteen's son that all his father's papers had been destroyed when their house had burned down many years before. This turned out to be incorrect. Captain Benteen had given the famous message to an Army officer friend, Captain Price. The message finally came to rest in the hands of a New York collector for 50 years before being put up for auction. By a happy circumstance, Colonel Charles Francis Bates learned of the existence of the message and secured it for the museum at West Point, where it resides today. The medals of Captain Miles Kehoe tell an interesting story. The senior captain among the 5 companies wiped out with Custer, Kehoe's body was found at the center of a group of troopers that included his 2 sergeants, the company trumpeter, and the guidon bearer. Kehoe's body was stripped but not mutilated, perhaps because of the medicine the Indians saw in the 2 papal medals he wore on a chain around his neck. Vatican records confirm these 2 medals were given to Kehoe during the Papal War of 1860. Captain Benteen secured the medals, which were sent to Kehoe's sister in Ireland. They remained in the family until 1988, when they passed into the hands of a well-known collector. The medals were recently auctioned off for $35,000. Second Lieutenant John James Crittenden of Kentucky received a gold watch from his father on his 21st birthday. Crittenden was 22 years old when he died at the Little Bighorn. His body was identified because of his glass eye. His watch was missing. In 1880, E.F. Gigot was working in a Canadian trading post when a trapper came in with furs, blankets, and a watch. Gigot bought the watch for $2. This was a gentleman's watch, and Gigot began to research. He wrote to the watchmaker in London, providing the serial number. The watchmaker confirmed that the watch had been bought by a man named Crittenden. Gigot wrote to the U.S. Army, which confirmed that the watch belonged to Second Lieutenant John James Crittenden. The watch was returned to the family, which loaned the artifact to the Kentucky Historical Society in 1949, where it remains to this day. The Culbertson Guidon. In 1895, the Detroit Institute of Arts paid $54 for a U.S. 7th Cavalry Guidon. Of the 5 guidons carried by Custer's troops at the last stand, only this one was immediately recovered, concealed under the body of a dead trooper. That trooper was Corporal John Foley, who was trying to escape on horseback. Foley was pursued by Indians and shot himself in the head before he was overtaken. The recovered flag later became known as the Culbertson Guidon after the member of the burial party who recovered it, Sergeant Ferdinand Culbertson. The Culbertson Guidon was sold by Sotheby's auction house to a private collector in 2010 for $2.2 million. A second 7th Cavalry Guidon was recovered in September 1876 at the Battle of Slim Butte, near present-day Riva, South Dakota. This flag is now displayed at the Little Bighorn Battlefield National Monument.